During Christmas Eve dinner, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, my grandfather leaned toward me with a warm smile and asked, "Did you like the house I gave you 2 years ago?" I nearly dropped my fork. There was no house, no call, no deed, not even a hint that he had ever intended such a gift. My parents quickly changed the subject, avoiding eye contact. And that's when it hit me, someone had kept it from me, and I was never meant to know. I stood there, heart hammering, as my grandfather's gaze, sharp as a blade, swept from me to my parents. "What house?" I choked out, because I hadn't received anything. My father's face drained of color, my stepmother froze, and in that instant I knew. Everything I thought I knew was a lie, and the betrayal was about to explode right in front of me. It was Christmas Eve, and the Ohio cold was biting, really digging into my thin jacket as I stood on the porch of this fancy new house. The phone in my hand was still warm from my Grandpa Will's call, just moments before. "Dorian, come over right now. I'm at your parents' new house," he'd said, his voice practically bursting with joy, like he was holding on to the best secret in the world, just waiting to share it. Grandpa Will, he was this incredibly successful businessman, always tied up with his construction company back in Chicago, so his visits? They were super rare, a real event. Just thinking about seeing him, my heart actually did a little flutter, even in that bone-chilling winter night. I pushed the heavy oak door open, and immediately, this wave of warmth hit me, the fireplace roaring, the rich, savory smell of roasted meat. It was everything a Christmas Eve should be. My grandpa, he was sitting at the head of the dining table, and his eyes, man, they sparkled like stars when he saw me. He stood up, pulled me into this tight hug, and his familiar woody cologne just washed over me, instantly making all the exhaustion from my shift melt away. "Dorian, do you like this house?" he asked, his voice thick with pride, as if he'd just handed me the keys to some priceless treasure. "Yes, Grandpa, it's a beautiful house," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, because something felt off, a knot forming in my stomach. "But it's my parents' house." And just like that, the world went silent. Deafening. Grandpa's face stiffened. His eyes, they just widened, darting from me to my father, Gregory, then to my stepmother, Susan, who was sitting across the table. My dad, usually so calm, so composed, suddenly turned pale, his hand trembling as he held his wine glass. Susan, she coughed, forcing this strange, brittle smile, but her eyes? They were glinting with pure panic. "Your parents' house?" Grandpa repeated, his voice dropping, turning as cold and sharp as that winter wind outside. "Dorian, explain yourself." I didn't understand what was happening, but this tidal wave of unease crashed over me. I glanced at my father, silently begging for an explanation, but he just lowered his head, completely avoiding my gaze. Susan, quick as a viper, jumped in, her voice trembling. "Will, there must be a misunderstanding. This is the family's house." But Grandpa didn't even look at her. He just stared at me. And in that moment I knew. A terrible, ugly secret was about to rip through our lives. My name is Dorian Marston, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of years spent in the shadow of pure injustice, cast aside by my own family. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you were just an outsider looking in, then maybe, just maybe, you'll get what I went through. But even if you haven't, I still want you to hear this. It's a story about a kid who grew up with a heart full of scars, and how, against all odds, he found light in the darkest places. I was born in a quiet suburban town in Ohio, the kind of place where autumn painted the streets gold and everyone knew everyone else's business. But my family? We were different. My mother, Diana, she passed away right after giving birth to me, due to some medical complications I still don't fully understand. All I know is she was the only light I never got to meet. My father, Gregory Marston, he was this stern man, always keeping his distance from me, like my very existence was a constant, painful reminder of something he desperately wanted to forget. When I was 3, my father remarried Susan. She was a woman with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, always cold, always calculating. They had a son together, Benjamin, Ben, everyone called him. Ben was literally the center of their entire universe. To my father, Ben was the pride, the future, the golden child of the Marston family. To Susan, Ben was everything she lived for, protected, spoiled rotten. And me? I was just the stepchild, the unwanted kid, the faint, irrelevant shadow in the house I called home. From a really young age, I felt the difference. I remember being 5, sitting in the corner of the living room, watching Ben tear open a present, a remote-controlled toy car, the kind every kid dreamed of. What did I get? A used plastic car with chipped wheels. My father just said, "It's good enough for you." Susan chimed in, "Ben needs new things to develop his intellect." Like I wasn't even worthy of anything better. When I brought home high grades from school, my father would just nod and say, "Not bad, but don't get complacent." But if Ben brought home a C, the whole house would erupt in celebration, like he just won a Nobel Prize. Honestly, I wasn't a jealous kid. I just wanted to be loved. To be acknowledged. Just once. But as the days bled into years, I realized that in my father's and Susan's eyes, I was never going to be good enough. Susan would say things like, "Dorian, why don't you try to be more like Ben?" Or, "You should be grateful to live in this house." Those words, no matter how softly spoken, they cut into me like 1,000 tiny knives. I started to really wonder, was I truly a burden? Was I really unworthy of love? Our family wasn't poor, but we definitely weren't rich. My father worked as a manager at a local insurance company, while Susan stayed home, doting on Ben like he was some kind of little king. I wasn't allowed to complain, because my father always reminded me how lucky I was to have a roof over my head. But that roof? It never felt like mine. My room was this tiny attic space, with a creaky old bed and a single window overlooking a dark, lonely alley. Meanwhile, Ben had this spacious room, filled with toys, posters of cool bands. Once, I actually asked my father why I couldn't have a room downstairs like Ben, and he snapped. "Don't ask for too much, Dorian. Know your place." I grew up with words like those, constant reminders that I was nothing important in this family. But I refused to drown in sorrow. I learned to smile, to pretend everything was fine, even though a furious storm raged inside me. I promised myself, one day, I would escape this family's shadow. I would prove I wasn't the useless person they thought I was. When I turned 18, I graduated high school with decent grades. No one at home really noticed, but I had this burning dream of going to college, becoming an engineer, doing something that would make Grandpa, the only person who genuinely seemed to care about me, proud. But that dream was crushed fast. One evening, when I tentatively asked my father about scholarships or loans for college, he looked at me with those same cold, dismissive eyes. "Dorian, we don't have enough money," he said. "Ben needs to be prioritized. He has great potential, and we have to invest in him." I stood there, stunned, feeling like the entire world was collapsing beneath my feet. Ben. The brother who only played video games and hung out with friends. He was the one chosen to fulfill his potential. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded and walked out of the room. That night, lying on my old, creaky bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, I made myself a new promise. I would rise on my own. If my parents didn't believe in me, I would believe in myself. I started working at a Walmart in town, first as a cashier, then in the stockroom. The job wasn't easy. Long night shifts, working through holidays, dealing with the most difficult customers. It left me utterly exhausted. But I didn't complain. Every single dollar I earned was a small, vital step toward escaping my family. I rented a tiny, rundown apartment. Stained walls, a leaky faucet, sure. But at least it was mine. I no longer had to endure Susan's snide remarks or my father's constant disappointed looks. Meanwhile, Ben? He was fully supported by my parents. He went to a prestigious private school, drove a brand new car my father bought him, and never had to lift a finger. Once, Susan actually came into the store where I worked. She saw me behind the cashier counter and smirked. Dorian, this is what you're doing? Such a shame. Ben will never have to do menial work like this. I gritted my teeth, forcing a smile. But inside I wanted to scream. Why? Why wasn't I worthy of the same opportunities as Ben? Those years, I lived in this crushing loneliness. I didn't have many friends because every spare moment was spent working and saving money. But I wasn't completely alone. Grandpa was the one bright spot in my entire life. He lived in Chicago, running his massive construction company. He was a man of work, but occasionally, he'd find time to call me. Those calls were my lifeline. He'd talk about his projects, ask about my life, and always say, "Dorian, you're a strong young man. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." I never told him how my father and Susan treated me. I didn't want him to worry, and part of me was terrified that if I spoke up, he'd think I was weak. Grandpa was the only one who ever talked about my mother. He said Diana was a gentle woman who loved books and dreamed of a fair world. He blamed himself for not being there when she gave birth to me, saying work had kept him away. If I had been there, things might have been different, he'd say, his voice thick with regret. I didn't blame him. I only wished I could have met her, just once, just to know that I had been truly loved. As the years passed, I grew accustomed to my independent, solitary life. I learned to fix the plumbing in my apartment, to cook simple meals, and most importantly, to keep my own heart from completely breaking. But deep inside, there was always an emptiness, the gaping void of a family I never truly had. I didn't know that while I was painstakingly trying to build my own life, a massive secret was being hidden from me by my father and Susan. A secret that would shatter everything. When I was 21, I was still stuck in that tiny rented apartment on the south side of town, still working night shifts at the supermarket. Empty mornings, simple meals, interrupted sleep, it had all become so routine, it no longer felt unusual. I didn't have much, but I had my freedom, my own space, and a tiny shred of self-respect that I had paid for with years of silent endurance. One early summer afternoon, while I was processing payments at the employee checkout, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Susan. "Come to the new house tonight. Address 1432 Hollow Creek. Small party." I read that message 3 times, just staring at the screen like it would somehow explain itself. I had never heard them mention moving. Not a single hint that they were even looking for a new house. And certainly, no one had bothered to ask if I wanted to move in with them. I hesitated. Part of me just wanted to ignore it, to pretend nothing had happened. But then I thought maybe this was a chance to reconnect, even just a little. Even if it was just a polite gathering. I wanted to go. Maybe to congratulate them. Maybe to prove that I wasn't the sullen, quiet kid I used to be. I had changed. And I thought maybe they had too. I stopped by a small liquor store near the supermarket and picked out an affordable bottle of red wine. Then I swung by the embroidery shop to collect a handkerchief I'd ordered the previous week, a small gift with the initials, GM, embroidered on it, for my father. I didn't have much money, but I wanted the gift to be thoughtful. The new house was in this brand new residential area on the west side of town, a place I'd never even set foot in. As my car turned onto a street lined with freshly planted maples and perfectly manicured green lawns, it felt like I was entering another world entirely. 2-story, semi-classic houses, with warm wooden doors, gray tiled roofs, red brick steps. Everything just screamed abundance, a sense of order and prosperity that our old house never had. I parked in front of the house Susan had sent the address for. It was a cream-colored home with a stone-stepped front yard, a wide porch, and arched windows overlooking a beautiful garden. I got out of the car, holding the wine bottle and the gift, and just stood there for a few seconds in front of the door. For some reason, my heart was pounding. Not out of excitement, but because this indescribable feeling stirred within me, like I was about to step into something that fundamentally didn't belong to me. Susan opened the door. She was wearing a silk dress, her makeup meticulously done. "Oh, Dorian, come in," she said, her smile as thin as the layer of blush on her cheeks. I stepped inside and looked around. A spacious living room with glossy wooden floors, a grand granite fireplace, plush beige armchairs, a classic chandelier. Family photos were already hanging on the walls. My father and Susan's wedding picture, Ben holding a sports trophy. Not a single photo of me. I wasn't surprised, of course. My father was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine, dressed in a crisp white shirt, looking more relaxed than usual. When he saw me, he gave a single, curt nod. "Oh, you're here." Nothing more. I handed him the wine and the gift, saying, "Congratulations on the new house, Dad." He took them, set them on a table without even glancing at them, and turned away. The party was just a few people, new neighbors, an older couple who were friends, and one of my father's colleagues. They chatted animatedly about the neighborhood, rising property prices, interior design, the pool they planned to build in the backyard. I sat in a corner, silent, just listening. We had to search forever to find this house, Susan was saying to someone next to her, her voice practically dripping with pride. Luckily, we closed the deal just before the market prices shot up. My father nodded, smiling, not denying a word. Gregory has a great eye for houses. I sat there, trying to smile along. I genuinely wanted to congratulate them, not for the house itself, but because I believed they had finally found something that made them happy. I didn't know that, in that exact moment, I was congratulating them for taking a gift that rightfully belonged to me. That night, when I returned to my cramped rented apartment, I opened my phone, intending to send Grandpa a quick message to check in. But I hesitated. He was getting older, always busy. I didn't want to bother him. I set the phone down, lay on my old bed, and stared at the peeling ceiling. Then I drifted off to sleep, completely unaware of the devastating truth lying silently beneath my feet like an unexploded bomb. After that housewarming party, everything seemed to return to its old rhythm, or at least the half-hearted routine I had long grown accustomed to. No one mentioned that day again. No one asked what I thought of the new house. And of course, no one brought up the possibility of me moving in with them. But then, something truly strange started happening. For every major holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Ben's birthday, even my father and Susan's wedding anniversary, I started receiving an invitation to their house. They weren't warm, heartfelt invitations, no. Just curt text messages. 6 p.m. Come for dinner. Ben's looking forward to seeing you. We have guests. Be on time. I went, not because I believed they had changed, but because I still felt this residual duty, this obligation of a son. Each time, I brought a small gift, carefully chosen and wrapped by hand. But my gifts were usually set aside, unopened in my presence, and no one offered a clear word of thanks. And the strangest thing was this: they started pulling me into family photos. The very first time was that Christmas. Susan actually called me over, saying, "Dorian, stand closer to Ben. We're taking a family picture." I was utterly surprised, but I stepped forward. My father stood in the middle, his arm around Ben's shoulders. I stood awkwardly at the edge of the frame, forcing a strained smile. As the camera clicked, I felt like I had just stepped into a bizarre, wordless play, and I was merely the supporting character thrown in to fill out the cast. In the times that followed, they kept pulling me into photos. At first, it was with the whole family. Later, sometimes just with my father. Once, Susan even placed her hand on my shoulder, smiling brightly, all for the camera. I didn't understand what was happening. Before, I had always been excluded from moments like these. The photos hanging in our old house never featured me. So, why were they doing this now? I actually asked once, lightly, after Ben's birthday dinner. Why have we been taking so many family photos lately? Susan just laughed and said, "Oh, we just want to capture memories. You're part of the family too, aren't you?" I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. I wasn't naive. I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put a name to it. I only felt like I was being led along, forced into a fabricated frame I had never belonged to, as if I were playing the role of the harmonious eldest son in a photo meant purely for display, not as myself. And then, on Christmas, When I was 23, the truth finally, brutally came to light. It was bitterly cold that day. I had just finished my shift at 4:30 in the afternoon, sitting in my rented apartment, drinking coffee, planning to show up a little late as usual. Just enough to make an appearance, eat a few bites, take a few photos, and then leave early. My phone rang. It was Grandpa. "Dorian, come over right now. I'm at your new house, 1432 Hollow Creek. I wanted to surprise you." I froze. Grandpa was here? In Ohio? He rarely left Chicago. His construction company always kept him tied up. I quickly threw on my jacket and practically ran out the door. My mind swirled with questions. Why didn't he tell me he was coming? And why, for God's sake, was he at my father's house? When I arrived, the house was glowing with Christmas lights, wreaths hung on the door, the twinkling lights of a Christmas tree shimmering through the window. I knocked, my heart pounding. Susan opened the door, and her smile stiffened the moment she saw me. "Dorian, why are you?" She stopped, her eyes darting frantically over my shoulder. Then I heard Grandpa's voice from inside. "Dorian, come in, my boy." Grandpa stood in the living room, tall and imposing, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. He hugged me, a tight embrace that carried both excitement and a strange hint of tension. "I wanted to surprise the whole family," he said, looking around. "This house? It's wonderful, isn't it? Are you happy living here?" I hesitated, a sickening wave of unease rising within me. I don't live here, Grandpa. I just visit." Grandpa's face completely changed. His smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, shifting from me to my father, Gregory, who stood frozen near the fireplace, a glass of wine in his hand. Susan quickly jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. "Will, there must be a misunderstanding. Dorian likes living independently, don't you, dear?" She looked at me, her eyes practically commanding me to agree. But Grandpa didn't look at her. He fixed his gaze on me, his voice dropping, dangerously low. "Dorian, tell me the truth. You don't live here?" I took a deep breath, feeling the crushing weight of the entire room pressing down on my shoulders. "I live in a rented apartment, Grandpa. On the south side of town. I pay for it with my supermarket wages." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. My father bowed his head, his hand tightening around his glass. Susan started to speak, her voice trembling. "Will, we thought it was best for Dorian. He wanted to be independent, and Ben needs space, too." "Enough." Grandpa cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Gregory, explain yourself. 2 years ago, I sent you $400,000 to buy a 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood. A gift for Dorian. To give him a good start. I made it clear. The house was for Dorian. So why is he living in a rundown apartment, while you and your family are living in that very house?" My father's face went utterly pale, as if all the blood had drained from his body. Susan opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I stood there, stunned, feeling the ground crumble beneath my feet. A house for me? $400,000? I looked at Grandpa, then at my father, searching for an explanation, a sign that this was just some terrible misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. My father set his glass down, his voice shaky, but trying desperately to stay composed. I thought the house would be better used by the whole family. Dorian's independent. He doesn't need a big house like this. Ben's young. He needs a good environment to grow, to study. Doesn't need it? Grandpa roared, stepping toward my father. You're saying he doesn't need it? Dorian, the grandson I entrusted to your care, is living in a rundown apartment, working night shifts to survive, while you and your wife live in the house that was meant for him? What did you do with the money I sent? You put the house in your name, didn't you? My father didn't answer. He just lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. Susan, regaining her voice, injected. Will, you don't understand. Dorian isn't my biological son. Ben is the future of this family. Dorian, He doesn't deserve a house like this. He's just, shut up! Grandpa shouted, his voice echoing so powerfully it seemed to shake the entire room. Doesn't deserve? Dorian is Diana's flesh and blood, my daughter's son. He's my grandson, and I trusted you, Gregory, to take care of him. But what have you done? You stole the gift I meant for him. Deceived me with these fake family photos. He pointed at the picture on the wall, the one of the whole family in the living room with me awkwardly standing at the edge. I thought Dorian was living happily here. I believed the photos you sent, but it turns out it was all a charade to hide your greed. My throat tightened, a burning knot of fury and sorrow. The photos. All those times I was called over to pose for pictures. Those staged, awkward moments I could never make sense of. It was all to deceive Grandpa. To make him think I was part of this happy, harmonious family. I looked at my father, waiting for an explanation, an apology, anything. But he just remained silent, his eyes avoiding mine. Dorian! Grandpa turned to me, his voice softening, but still resolute. Go get your things. You're coming to Chicago with me. This house? I'll make sure it belongs to you as I originally intended. And you, Gregory. His voice hardened again. I'll be speaking with my lawyer. You'll answer for what you've done. Susan burst into tears, but I felt no pity for her. My father finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Dorian, I just wanted what was best for the family. Best for the family? I repeated, my voice calm, but chillingly cold. You never considered me part of this family. I've spent my whole life trying to make you proud, but all you ever saw was Ben. You took away my chance, and you didn't even bother to tell me the truth. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with pain, but also unwavering determination. Let's go, Dorian. You don't need to stay here anymore. The biting chill of Christmas night bit into my skin as we stepped out of the house that was supposed to be mine. The dim glow of streetlights illuminated the snow-covered street, and I could feel my heavy breaths blending into the frigid air. Grandpa led me to a sleek black SUV parked by the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, opened the door for us. To the hotel first, Grandpa said, his voice low but firm. I slid into the back seat beside him, feeling like I was stepping into an entirely different world. A world I never thought I belonged to. Are you okay, Dorian? Grandpa asked, his eyes gentle but piercing, as if trying to read every chaotic thought in my mind. I don't know, Grandpa, I replied, my voice hoarse. Everything's happening so fast. I still don't fully understand. He nodded, placing a comforting hand on my knee. I know, son. But from now on, things will be different. You'll come to Chicago with me. We'll start over, just the two of us. I looked out the window, the Christmas lights blurring past like faint, distant sparks. Chicago. A city I'd only ever heard about through Grandpa's stories, where he built his construction empire from nothing. I had never been there. Never thought I'd have the chance. But now, it was where I would begin again. A new life. A chance to finally escape the suffocating shadow of my past. The very next morning, we took an early flight to Chicago. I sat by the window, gazing down at the endless snow-covered fields below, feeling like I was literally leaving behind an old, worn-out world for a dream. Grandpa sat beside me, quietly reading a business newspaper. But every now and then, he'd glance at me with an encouraging smile. When the plane landed at O'Hare Airport, a biting Chicago wind greeted us. James, Grandpa's driver, was waiting with the familiar SUV. We drove through the bustling city streets, where skyscrapers towered overhead, their steel and glass gleaming under the winter sun. I had never seen anything like it. Ohio, with its narrow roads and modest houses, seemed to belong to another planet. The car turned into an upscale suburban neighborhood, where the streets were paved with stone, lined with ancient oaks and sprawling mansions. James stopped in front of a massive iron gate, beyond which a long driveway led to a 3-story mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and vibrant red rose bushes, even in the dead of winter. My jaw dropped. I was completely speechless. Is this your house, Grandpa? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. Grandpa laughed heartily, clapping me on the shoulder. Welcome to my home, Dorian. And now it's your home, too? Grandpa's mansion wasn't just a house. It was a palace. The intricately carved wooden front door opened into a grand foyer with marble floors, a spiral staircase leading upstairs, and abstract paintings lining the walls. The living room was 3 times the size of my entire rented apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a sprawling backyard garden, complete with a shimmering pool and an outdoor barbecue area. The rich scent of pine and leather from the luxurious furniture made me feel like I had stepped into a 5-star hotel. I don't know what to say, I whispered, standing in the middle of the living room, still clutching my small, pathetic bag of belongings. You don't need to say anything, Grandpa replied, leading me upstairs. Your room is here. He opened the door to a spacious bedroom with a king-sized bed, a solid walnut desk, and a window overlooking the garden. A brand new laptop sat on the desk, and a soft, plush rug covered the floor. This is where you can start over. No pressure, no burdens, just a fresh start. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like I was dreaming. Just hours ago, I was in my rundown apartment with a leaky faucet and peeling ceiling. Now I was here, in a room I wouldn't have dared to imagine. But alongside the overwhelming awe, there was a lingering ache. The house in Ohio, the house that was meant to be mine, it still felt like a thorn in my heart. That evening, Grandpa took me to a fancy restaurant in downtown Chicago. We sat in a quiet corner, the candlelight flickering on the table. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine, but I only took a small sip, still unaccustomed to such luxury. Dorian, he began, his voice low and serious. There are things we need to talk about. About your father. The house. And what really happened. I nodded, my heart pounding. I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. 2 years ago, I sent Gregory $400,000 to buy that house in Hollow Creek. I wanted it to be a gift for you, a foundation for you to build your future. I was so busy with the company, unable to oversee the purchase myself, so I trusted Gregory to handle it. I thought he would follow my wishes. He paused, his eyes darkening. But I was wrong. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my voice steady. So Dad kept the house for himself? That's not all, Grandpa said, his voice thick with anger. I've been sending Gregory money since you were a child. Not just for the house. I sent money every single year to cover your school fees, clothes, everything you needed to grow up in the best conditions. I thought Gregory was taking care of you the way I wanted. He slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses tremble. But today, when I heard you talk about living in a rented apartment, working night shifts at a supermarket, I realized he kept it all for himself and his new family. It felt like someone had literally punched me in the chest. School fees, clothes, the things I never had. All those years wearing hand-me-downs, eating instant noodles, and working myself to exhaustion just to make ends meet. It could have been so different. My father, the man I tried so hard to please, had taken not only the house, but also every single opportunity Grandpa meant for me. I didn't know about any of that money, I said, my voice choking. Dad never told me. I thought he didn't have enough, so I had to manage on my own. That bastard, Grandpa growled, drawing glances from nearby tables. I trusted him with you, thinking he'd treat you well. But he betrayed me. And he betrayed your mother, Diana. Hearing my mother's name made my eyes sting. I had never met her, but through Grandpa's stories, I knew she was a gentle woman who wanted a good life for me. The thought that my father had stolen what she and Grandpa intended for me ignited a fury I couldn't suppress. What are you going to do, Grandpa? I asked, though I could already guess part of the answer. I'm going to sue Gregory, he said, his voice cold, his eyes hard as stone. I'll make sure the house is transferred to you, and I'll cut off all financial support to him. He doesn't deserve a single cent. I stared at the table in silence. Part of me absolutely wanted my father to pay, to face the consequences of his despicable actions. But another part, the part that had grown up in neglect and pain, just wanted to let it go. I was tired of living in resentment. I didn't want my new life in Chicago to be tainted by lawsuits and endless disputes. "Grandpa," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Don't sue him. I know you're angry, and so am I, but it's already happened. I don't want to drag this out. Cutting off his financial support is enough to make them realize they can't keep taking advantage of you. I just want to start over here with you. Please." Grandpa looked at me, his eyes softening, though I could still see the deep pain in them. "Are you sure, Dorian? You have every right to claim what's yours." "I'm sure," I replied. "That house? It doesn't matter anymore. I want to build my future, not live to fix the past." He nodded slowly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than I thought, Dorian. Your mother would be so proud of you." The weeks that followed in Chicago were an intense emotional journey. I moved permanently into Grandpa's mansion, and each day felt like I was learning to live again from scratch. Grandpa didn't just give me a home. He gave me a chance to rediscover myself. He took me to visit his construction company, this massive, modern building in downtown Chicago with bright offices and a bustling team of employees. He introduced me to everyone as Will Marston's grandson. And for the very first time, I felt recognized, seen as a person of real value. "Would you like to try working here?" he asked one day as we stood overlooking a construction site in the suburbs. "You don't have to do big things right away. You can start with small projects, learn as you go." I hesitated. I had never imagined myself working in construction, with its technical blueprints and complex numbers, but the pure trust in Grandpa's eyes made me want to try. "I'll give it a shot, Grandpa," I said. "But I can't promise I'll be good at it right away." He laughed heartily. "No one's good from the start, Dorian. But you have heart and determination. That's all I need." I started working at his company, initially as an assistant in the planning department, organizing documents and tracking project progress. The work wasn't easy, but with each passing day, I learned to read blueprints, understand construction processes, and even began contributing ideas during meetings. My colleagues, who at first only knew me as the boss's grandson, gradually started to look at me with genuine respect. They saw me work hard, stay late to finish tasks, and refuse to rely on Grandpa for any special treatment. Outside of work, I began exploring Chicago. I walked through its lively streets, visited museums, and spent hours in coffee shops, reading books or simply watching people pass by. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had time to breathe, to dream, to become a better version of myself. Though life in Chicago gave me so much hope, the scars of my past didn't fade easily. Some nights, I lay in the comfortable king-sized bed in my new room, but I'd dream of my old rented apartment. I'd hear Susan's mocking voice or see my father's cold gaze. I'd wake up wondering if I truly deserved this incredible life, or if it was all just a dream that would vanish. Grandpa noticed when I grew quiet. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he handed me an old framed photo. It was my mother, Diana, smiling brightly, holding a small dog. "Your mother always wanted